The first explosion tore the night sky apart and shook the ground under his boots. Ethan turned toward the burning horizon and knew at once this was not a small raid. The enemy had come with their full strength. Smoke rolled over the hills, and the screams of frightened villagers echoed through the valley. In the distance, the tall towers of the Zarian clan's fortress flickered under the orange glow of fire. They were under attack, and he was standing too far from safety to watch and do nothing. He grabbed his rifle, but a movement in the shadows caught his eye. Someone was running toward him, stumbling over the uneven dirt path. It was not a soldier. The figure was smaller, lighter, and clutching something long wrapped in cloth. As she came closer, her pale blue skin caught the moonlight. Her eyes were wild with fear, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. She was no stranger to him. This was Lyra, daughter of the Zarian chief, and the object in her hands could only be one thing: the clan's sacred sword. Her voice trembled as she reached him. They broke through the outer gates. My father sent me to get this to safety. She glanced over her shoulder as if the enemy were right behind her. But I cannot fight my way out. You must take it. She shoved the sword into his hands before he could speak. The cloth fell open just enough for the steel to catch the firelight. It was beautiful, with markings that seemed to shimmer in the air, but it felt heavier than its weight. It felt like a burden. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but another blast rocked the ground. Lyra was thrown forward into his chest. He steadied her, then looked past her toward the enemy shapes spilling down the road. Armored soldiers, their visors glowing red, were marching in a tight line. They carried plasma rifles and heavy shields, their steps pounding like a drumbeat of death. Running was no longer an option. They were too close. Without thinking, Ethan unsheathed the sword. The moment the blade left the scabbard, a strange hum filled the air, and a faint blue light crawled along its edges. The enemy paused for a fraction of a second, as if they recognized it. Then they charged. Lyra gasped and stepped back, her eyes fixed on him. Ethan, if you use that blade, the clan will see it as a vow. But he had no time to ask what she meant. The first soldier swung his shield, aiming to crush Ethan's ribs. Ethan sidestepped and drove the glowing blade through the gap in the armor. The hum became a sharp cry of power, and the soldier fell, lifeless before he hit the ground. The next attacker hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Soon Ethan was moving faster than he thought possible, the blade pulling his arms into every strike. The enemy's line broke, and the survivors turned and ran. He was left standing over the fallen, chest heaving, the sword still glowing in his grip. Silence fell over the road except for the crackle of burning rooftops. Lyra stepped closer, her voice softer now. You saved me and the sword, but you do not understand what you have done. She reached out and touched the flat of the blade, and her eyes held something deeper than gratitude. This weapon is not just a symbol. To wield it in battle is to claim the right to stand beside the chief's bloodline. By saving me with it, you have marked yourself as my protector and, by our law, my future husband. Ethan blinked at her, unsure if the battle had left his mind spinning. Marriage? Law? None of it made sense. But the sound of distant war drums told him this was not the time to argue. The enemy had not been defeated, only delayed. He tightened his grip on the sword and looked toward the burning fortress. Whatever strange rule he had just stepped into, he now carried the responsibility for her safety. The war was far from over, and his role in it had only just begun. Ethan and Lyra moved quickly along the back road that wound toward the forest. The main path was already crawling with enemy patrols. Smoke curled above the treetops, blotting out the stars. Every few steps, Lyra glanced behind them, her hand never straying far from the sword now strapped across Ethan's back. She walked in silence, but her shoulders were tense, as if she expected an arrow or a plasma bolt to fly toward them at any second. The forest swallowed them in darkness. Here, the sounds of battle faded to distant echoes, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the crunch of dry branches underfoot. Ethan kept his rifle ready, his other hand brushing the hilt of the sword from time to time. He could still feel the strange hum it made during the fight, as though the weapon was alive. Lyra finally spoke. "You do not understand what that blade means to my people. The law is old, older than my father's reign. Once drawn in defense of the clan, it binds the wielder to its heir. The vow is unbreakable." Her voice carried no anger, only the weight of certainty. Ethan wanted to tell her he never meant to take any vow, but he saw the way she looked at him. She was not accusing him. She was warning him. The trees grew denser, and the moonlight barely reached the forest floor. Somewhere far ahead, a faint light flickered. Lyra touched his arm and whispered, "There is a safe place beyond that ridge. We can rest there for a short time." They moved toward it, stepping carefully between roots and fallen logs. The light turned out to be a lantern hanging outside a small stone hut. An old Zarian elder stood in the doorway, his long silver hair tied behind his head. His gaze went straight to the sword on Ethan's back. Without a word, he stepped aside to let them in. The air inside was warm from a small fire pit. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the space with a sharp, clean scent. The elder's eyes never left the weapon. "So the blade has chosen," he said at last. Lyra lowered her head in respect. Ethan sat near the fire, still uneasy. "I'm just trying to keep us alive," he said. The elder shook his head. "It is more than that, human. The sword of the Zarian does not allow chance. It calls to those it deems worthy. It is why you still live after facing their warriors. It is why she still stands beside you. The enemy will not stop now. They will come for you because of what you carry." The elder's tone was calm, but the meaning was sharp as any blade. Lyra stepped closer to Ethan. "He is right. They will see you as a threat, not just to this village, but to the entire invasion. You wounded their pride as much as their soldiers." She looked toward the door as if expecting it to burst open. "We cannot wait here. If we move at dawn, we can reach the mountain pass before they close it." Ethan rose, knowing rest would be short. The fire's warmth felt like a luxury they could not afford. Before they left, the elder placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Remember, the bond you now hold is not only to her but to our people. Protect her, and you protect us all." Ethan gave a short nod. He had fought wars before, but never for a cause so strange and personal. The hut door closed behind them, and the cold night air rushed back in. Above the treetops, the glow of the burning fortress still stained the horizon. The war was not ending. It was following them. The first light of dawn broke through the trees as Ethan and Lyra moved toward the mountain pass. Frost crunched under their boots, and their breath hung in the cold air. The forest was quiet, too quiet for comfort. Ethan kept his rifle ready, scanning the shadows between the trunks. The sword across his back felt heavier than before, as if it knew danger was close. They followed a narrow trail that wound upward. From here, the valley spread out below them, the ruins of the Zarian fortress barely visible through the smoke. Lyra walked ahead, her pace steady but cautious. She kept glancing at the sky, where the faint hum of enemy scout ships broke the silence. "If they spot us now, the pass will be lost," she said. Her voice was calm, but Ethan could hear the tension beneath it. Halfway up the slope, they found the first sign of trouble. Footprints, fresh in the frost, led toward the ridge ahead. They were too large to be human, and too many to belong to a single patrol. Ethan crouched beside them, running a gloved hand over the prints. "They are waiting for us," he said quietly. Lyra's hand went to the hilt of the sword, but she looked at him for direction. He knew turning back was not an option. They moved forward more slowly now, keeping to the cover of rocks and thick brush. The higher they climbed, the colder the air grew. The wind howled through the pass, carrying with it the metallic scent of enemy weapons. At the top of the ridge, Ethan paused and signaled Lyra to stay low. Beyond the next bend, the path widened into an open stretch of stone, and in the middle of it stood a squad of enemy soldiers. Their armor was dark and sleek, and their rifles were trained on the approach. Ethan studied them for a moment, then reached for the sword. The blade slid free with a low hum, and the faint blue light returned, brighter in the pale morning. Lyra drew in a breath but said nothing. She knew what this meant. The enemy soldiers straightened at the sight of the weapon. One of them barked an order, and they began to advance. Ethan stepped forward to meet them, the cold air stinging his face. The first two came fast, rifles raised. Ethan deflected the shots with the flat of the sword, the energy sparking off its surface. He moved in close, cutting one soldier down and spinning to strike the other. The rest hesitated for only a second before charging. Lyra stayed behind him, ready with her own blade, but Ethan's movements were swift and precise. Every strike of the sword sent a ripple of force through the air, knocking enemies back. Soon, the last soldier fell, and the pass was silent again. Ethan lowered the sword, but did not sheath it yet. Lyra stepped beside him, her eyes scanning the fallen. They will send more. We must keep moving. Her voice held no relief, only urgency. Ethan nodded. The fight had drained some of his strength, but the thought of stopping here felt worse. They crossed the open stretch and followed the path deeper into the mountains, where the cliffs rose high on either side. The wind carried a distant roar, not of engines, but of something living. Lyra's steps slowed, and she glanced toward a shadowed crevice in the rock. "The guardian of the pass," she said softly. "It wakes when blood is spilled here." Ethan tightened his grip on the sword. If this guardian was another enemy to face, they would have to fight before the way was clear. The sound grew louder, echoing through the stone walls, until it felt like the mountains themselves were breathing. Whatever waited ahead was coming for them. The roar became a thunder in the narrow pass. Dust and loose stones fell from the cliffs, and the air grew heavy with a strange heat. Ethan moved in front of Lyra, sword raised. From the darkness of the crevice, two glowing eyes appeared, wide and unblinking. A massive shape stepped into the light, its skin like black stone and its breath steaming in the cold air. The guardian of the pass was no legend. It was real, and it was blocking their way. It stood on four powerful legs, each ending in claws that could carve stone. Its head was broad, its mouth filled with jagged teeth that caught the morning sun. A low growl rolled from its chest, shaking the ground beneath them. Lyra's hand went to her own blade, but she did not move forward. "This one cannot be killed by normal weapons," she said. "Only the clan sword can cut its hide." Ethan understood what she meant. The fight was his. The guardian stepped closer, its claws scraping against the rock. Ethan circled to the side, looking for an opening. The sword's hum grew louder in his hands, almost as if it sensed the danger. The beast lunged without warning, its jaws snapping at where he had been a moment before. He rolled aside, the heat from its breath burning across his face. His boots skidded on loose gravel, but he kept his grip on the weapon. He struck at its side, the blade slicing deep enough to draw a spray of glowing blue blood. The guardian roared in pain and swung its massive tail, catching Ethan across the chest and throwing him against the cliff wall. The impact rattled his bones, but he forced himself to stand. The beast charged again, its shadow covering the path. Ethan planted his feet and met it head-on, driving the sword upward into its throat. The hum turned into a piercing cry, and the light along the blade flared. The guardian's momentum carried it forward, but its body collapsed before it could reach him. The roar faded into silence, and the air grew still again. Ethan pulled the blade free and stepped back, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The creature lay unmoving, its blood soaking into the stone. Lyra approached. Slowly, her eyes fixed on him. "You have done what no outsider has ever done," she said. Her voice carried both awe and something heavier. "The pass is open, but now every clan in the mountains will hear of this. They will see you as more than a warrior. They will see you as the one chosen by the sword." Ethan wiped the blade clean and slid it back into its scabbard. The weight on his back felt heavier than before, but it was not the steel. It was the meaning. They crossed the rest of the pass without another challenge. On the far side, the land opened into a valley of green fields and winding rivers. Smoke still rose in the distance, but here the war seemed far away. Lyra pointed toward a cluster of stone towers on the horizon. "That is the High Council's hall. We must reach it before nightfall. They need to hear what happened in the fortress, and they must know who now carries the sword." Ethan glanced at her, unsure of what reception they would face. As they walked, the wind carried the faint sound of horns. Not the enemy's horns, but the deep call of the Zarian signal. Lyra stopped, listening. "They are calling the clans together," she said. "Word of the Guardian's death has already spread." Her tone was calm, but Ethan could see the tension in her eyes. Whatever awaited them at the High Council, it would not be a simple welcome. The weight of his actions was still unfolding, and the path ahead was only growing more dangerous. The valley road to the High Council's hall stretched before them, the towers growing taller with every step. The air here was cleaner, touched by the scent of river water and the faint perfume of wildflowers. Yet there was no comfort in the beauty. Ethan's eyes kept scanning the ridges, searching for movement. Lyra walked beside him, her pace steady, her gaze fixed on the towers ahead. "When we enter," she said, "they will already know your name. You must be ready for their judgment." The great gates of the hall stood open when they arrived. Zarian guards in ceremonial armor lined the entrance, their spears crossed in salute. Ethan felt their eyes on him, studying not his face but the sword across his back. Inside, the main chamber was lit by shafts of sunlight through high windows. At the far end, the High Council sat on a raised platform. 7 elders in robes of deep blue watched in silence as they approached. Lyra knelt before them, and Ethan followed her lead. An elder with a voice like stone breaking spoke first. "The fortress has fallen, yet the heir stands before us, alive. And she stands beside one who wields the sword." His eyes rested on Ethan. "This is not the way of tradition. No outsider has ever taken the blade into battle." Another elder leaned forward. "Yet he has done more than wield it. He has slain the guardian of the pass. By our law, that makes him not only a champion but bound to the bloodline he has defended." The words settled over the hall like a heavy cloak. Ethan kept his expression calm, but his mind worked quickly. This was no misunderstanding. The law was clear, and these people took it as unbreakable. Lyra rose to her feet. "He fought because I asked him. He fought because there was no other way. But if the law demands a vow, then I will not refuse it." Her voice was strong, and her eyes met Ethan's without fear. The eldest counselor stood, his robe trailing across the floor. "Then it is decided. From this day, Ethan of Earth is the protector and husband of Lyra of the Zarian. His fate is tied to ours, and ours to his." The guards struck the floor with the butts of their spears, the sound echoing through the chamber. Ethan stood, the sword's weight a reminder of the promise he had not intended to make but could not deny. Lyra stepped to his side, her presence both steady and fierce. Before the ceremony could end, a messenger burst into the hall, his armor scorched and dented. "The enemy moves again," he said, his voice breathless. "Their main force is marching through the southern valley. They will be here before nightfall." The council's calm broke into sharp orders and hurried voices. Lyra turned to Ethan. This is why the vow matters. You are not bound by words alone. You are bound to stand with us now. Ethan nodded once. Then we fight. The council chamber became a place of movement. Warriors arming themselves, runners carrying orders. Outside, the horn sounded again, deeper this time, calling the clans to war. Ethan and Lyra left the hall together, stepping into the bright afternoon. In the distance, dust clouds marked the enemy's approach. The time for debate was over. The time for action had begun. When the enemy reached the edge of the valley, they found the Zarian army waiting in a solid line. At the center stood Ethan, the clan's sword glowing in the sunlight. Lyra stood beside him, her own blade ready. The first wave came fast, but Ethan met them with the strength of one who fought not for himself, but for the people who now called him theirs. The sword's hum filled the air, and each strike cut through armor and fear alike. Lyra moved with him, their steps in perfect rhythm. By nightfall, the valley was silent again. The enemy lay broken, their advance stopped. Fires burned along the ridges, casting long shadows over the field. The Zarian warriors cheered, but Ethan's eyes found only Lyra's. She stepped closer, her voice low but steady. You came to our world as a stranger. You stand here now as my equal, my protector, and my husband by law and by choice. Ethan looked at her, the sword resting between them, and gave a short nod. Whatever his life had been before, it had changed forever on this ground, and he accepted it without regret.